Florida is still being sold as the retirement promised land. No state income tax, 365 days of sunshine, and a coastline that sprawls up and down both coasts of the state. But in 2026, the reality is far more calculated. The median single-family home price in Florida sits just under $405,000, about 5 to 6% below its all-time high, but still well above the national average. That means the tax savings retirees came for are being quietly swallowed by mortgage payments, rising insurance, and property taxes that compound every year you own. The real story isn't that everything is overpriced. It's that the places where the math still makes sense are the ones almost nobody advertises. Coastal towns where you can still buy a home under $300,000, lock in a lower tax base, and position yourself for long-term breaks if you stay put. To understand why these 8 towns matter, you have to look at the system, not the postcards. Florida's housing market in 2026 is no longer in a manic bull phase, but it's not in a free-fall crash either. Analysts describe it as firmer ground. Prices are cooling off the spike, but they're still anchored above where they were in the early 2000s and 20s. The statewide median for single-family homes hovers around $400,000, and in many coastal metros, it pushes into the high 400s or even low 500s. The cost of living, once a major draw, has also shifted. Adjusted for housing, Florida now runs about 10% above the national average, which means everyday expenses, groceries, utilities, medical, and services are still higher than retirees expect. At the same time, people keep moving in. The state is projected to add over 300,000 residents in 2026, fueled by domestic migration from higher tax states and a continuous stream of 60-plus buyers. The result is a quiet stress test. Demand for affordable coastal living is still outpacing supply, and the gap is being pushed into the towns that don't show up on the billboards. These 8 Florida beach communities are the ones that still sit, at least at the moment, within the under $300,000 bracket, or close enough to make the dual savings multiplier. Lower purchase price plus lower recurring costs work in a long-term retirement plan. Start with Fort Pierce on the Atlantic coast in St. Lucie County. The median sale price here is still in the low to mid-200s, making it one of the least expensive coastal entry points on the East Coast. That matters because Florida's property tax system is built on assessed value. A $300,000 home will cost you more in taxes every year than a $200,000 home, even if the rate is the same. Fort Pierce layers on another layer of advantage. The state offers an extra senior exemption for residents 65 and older whose homes are valued at $250,000 or less. If you keep that property as your primary residence for 25 years without moving it, many counties allow that exemption to reduce or eliminate the county-level portion of your tax bill. Fort Pierce's median may be just under $300,000, but there are still homes under $250,000 sprinkled through the area, which means you're not just buying a cheaper house, you're buying a ticket into a system that rewards long-term residency with smaller tax bills. Then there's Daytona Beach, which is a study in cognitive dissonance. It's one of the most recognized beach towns in the country. NASCAR, drive on sand, decades of spring break branding, and yet the typical home price inside the city boundaries is still around $245,000. The metro area as a whole climbs higher, into the mid-300,000s, but even that undercuts many other Florida coastal markets. Volusia County's effective property tax rate runs in the low single-digit range, often under 1%. So when you pair a $245,000 entry price with that rate, the annual tax number is one of the lowest on this list. Daytona delivers something other cheaper towns often don't, a full-stack lifestyle. You're within reach of water parks, golf courses, entertainment districts, and medical infrastructure, but you're not paying luxury resort prices for the privilege. For retirees who want activity without the premium, it's a rare case where the brand name doesn't come with a luxury price tag. On the Space Coast, Cocoa and Brevard County sits with a median around $270,000. By pure headline price, it's not the cheapest on the map, but the long-term math favors it. Brevard County's effective property tax rate floats between roughly 0.72 and 0.90%, which is among the lowest for any coastal county in the state. Over a 20-year or 30-year retirement, the cumulative savings from that lower rate can outpace the benefit of buying a slightly cheaper home in a county where the tax percentage is higher. The cost of living index measured near Cape Canaveral is about 101.9, which is essentially the same as the national average, a striking number for a town that steps from the Atlantic. That means you're paying close to normal prices for groceries, utilities, and services while still getting coastal access. Cocoa's neighbor Cocoa Beach adds another wrinkle. In certain pockets, the town is genuinely walkable, with sidewalks, shops, and restaurants clustered around the pier and downtown. In a state that's built around cars, that pedestrian option is quietly valuable. Layer on regular rocket launches from Kennedy Space Center and proximity to a major cruise terminal, and Cocoa becomes the long-term hold for retirees who care more about recurring costs than the lowest headline price. Titusville, also in Brevard County, sits at about $299,000, just under the $300,000 psychological line. It inherits the same low tax rate as Cocoa, so the percentage bite is comparable. What Titusville trades in price, it gains in space and quiet. You're minutes from Atlantic beaches and the Intracoastal Waterway, but you're not living inside the cruise ship congestion or the dense tourist infrastructure of Cocoa Beach. Instead, you have access to Canaveral National Seashore and Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, which translates to hiking, birdwatching, and quieter stretches of shoreline. The town itself leans residential and older, with a slower pace and a focus on outdoor recreation rather than nightlife. The tax structure is doing the heavy lifting, but the lifestyle is built around trails, parks, and low-key community events instead of loud entertainment districts. Vero Beach on the Atlantic in Indian River County runs a median around $284,000 countywide, which is below many other coastal areas despite the county's upscale reputation in some pockets. The town markets itself as Old Florida, quiet beaches, a slower rhythm, and an active arts and culture scene anchored by institutions like the Vero Beach Museum of Art. The financial angle is quieter but important. Indian River County's effective property tax rate is about 0.73%, which is even lower than Brevard's. Pair that with a median price that's still below the statewide coastal average, and the annual tax bill starts to resemble what you'd see in an inland town, not a beachfront city. Vero Beach isn't trying to be Daytona. It's not loud, it's not packed with nightclubs, and it won't appeal to retirees who want constant activity. But if your ideal retirement involves empty beach walks, gallery visits, and a community that values culture over nightlife, the numbers here quietly tilt in your favor over the long term. Over in the Florida Panhandle, Valparaiso sits at roughly $236,000, which is the second lowest verified median on this list. It's positioned just inland from the Emerald Coast, with that famous sugar white sand and emerald green water visible a short drive away. The beach town of Destin, a few miles down the road, runs at a premium. Valparaiso does not. You're paying a fraction of the price for access to the same shoreline because you're not living directly on the Gulf. The population is around 5,000, which is small-town scale, quiet streets, low traffic, and a slower daily rhythm. At $236,000, this is also one of the few coastal towns where the median falls under the $250,000 threshold that Florida's senior exemption system targets. If you're in your early 60s and plan to stay put, buying here can position you to potentially zero out the county portion of your tax bill after 25 years of continuous residency. That's not a marketing gimmick. It's a built-in policy lever that, in this town, still lines up with the current price structure. Callaway, a suburb of Panama City in Bay County, runs at about $286,000. It's not the cheapest in the Panhandle, but it offers something cheaper options lack: direct access to East Bay, a sheltered estuary that's calmer than the open Gulf. East Bay is ideal for kayaking, canoeing, and wildlife spotting, and the ecosystem attracts birders and anglers who want a quieter, more nature-focused experience. Bay County's overall median home value is listed around $235,000, which keeps the broader market affordable even as the county tax rate climbs to roughly 1.10%. That's on the higher side of this list, but because the underlying home value is still low, the annual tax bill usually lands somewhere around $2,400. Callaway sits in the middle. Suburban peace, light-density neighborhoods, and city amenities in Panama City within easy reach. You're getting the best of both worlds, small-town quiet with backup access to shopping, medical care, and entertainment, without being in the middle of the tourist traffic. Then there's Lynn Haven, also in Bay County, which shares that same affordable price band but leans more explicitly into retirement. The median there tracks closely with Callaway, but the town's identity is built around older residents, safe neighborhoods, and predictable routines. It's not trying to attract young families or spring break crowds. The community is anchored by parks, walking paths, and a low criminal reputation. The tax structure mirrors Callaway's. Mid-low $200,000 homes paired with a 1.10% rate, so you're still in a moderate tax environment. The difference is in the lived experience. If what you want is security, routine, and a slower pace rather than nightclubs or festivals, Lynn Haven is the panhandle option that quietly leans into longevity rather than excitement. Stepping back, the pattern across these 8 towns is structural. They cluster into 3 corridors: the Atlantic Value Coast, the Northwest Gulf and Panhandle Belt, and the Southwest Gulf region. The Atlantic Value Coast offers some of the lowest long-term property tax rates, often under 1%, while still providing access to major medical centers and regional infrastructure. The Northwest Gulf and Panhandle region delivers some of the lowest cost of living figures in the state, typically at or just above the national average, even with coastal access. The Southwest Gulf towns, those farther south along the Gulf Coast, give you marinas, waterways, and nature preserves without the Naples-level price tags that dominate the headlines. The dual savings multiplier only works if you stay put. If you flip the house, the long-term exemptions evaporate. Looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, the risks are baked into the structure. Insurance in Florida is still rising, hurricane exposure remains a hard-coded reality, and property tax caps are subject to politics, not guarantee. If you bank on a 25-year senior exemption but sell before that window, the math unwinds. The Florida retirement dream isn't dead, but it's become far more conditional. It's only viable in specific corridors, in towns that quietly align purchase price, tax rate, and exemption thresholds. The back doors are still open, but they're narrower, and they're built for people who understand that the real advantage isn't just in where you buy, but in how long you stay.